Hey guys, welcome. Alright, so in the last video, we ended up making our first game project. Now it's time to get to the good stuff. We're gonna check out the interface, we're gonna add a few items into our world, and we're gonna learn how to navigate around the UI. Alright, so open up Unity Hub. And this is the project that we made previously. If you want to follow along, there's gonna be a link in the video description. Follow along with that video, make this project, and then we can pick it up from there. All right, so let's click into it. Currently, we're using version 2018.4.14 F1. Now, the reason I chose this version is because it's the latest, most stable version of Unity as of this video. Meaning Pro Grids, Pro Builder, any packages that we add later, they're going to be compatible. We're not going to be dealing with any bugs, and pretty much it's the most pampered version that we have to work with. So we're going to click into it. Now we made it as an empty project. So first things first, what you want to do is you want to click on File, and we're going to save our scene. We're going to name it. All right, so you can either click on Save or Save As. Me, I'm going to click on Save As. Once you do that, this window is going to pop up. Now it's going to show you your project window. Pretty much all the files you have inside of your project. Now currently we only have one folder, so we're going to click into that folder, and as you can see, Unity was kind enough to give us a sample file. So this is pretty much a sample scene. Now the sample scene consists of a camera and a light, and it's named Untitled, meaning we want you to name it. So we're going to make a brand new name. You can call this whatever you want. As for myself, I'm going to call this Uptown's World. Actually, no. I'm going to call this Uptown's Realm, because I'm into Game of Thrones. Well, at least I was there last season. All right, so now that we have our scene saved, as you can see, it changed under the hierarchy. Now, if you want to see what's inside of your scene, there's going to be an arrow to the left. If you click on that little drop-down menu, it'll reveal what's inside of your scene. So we have the main camera, and we also have a directional light. Now, starting off, I want to delete these items. I don't want anything inside of my scene because I want to go over a few things. So I'm going to delete the directional light. I'll select the main camera. I'm going to right click, delete that too. All right, so there's nothing inside of our world. Pretty much our world consists of our scene. Now, the hierarchy window and the scene window is the same thing. The hierarchy is a list of the items that are inside of your world, and the scene is a visual representation of what's inside of your world. So whatever's inside of your scene is also what you have inside of your hierarchy. Whatever's in your hierarchy is inside of your scene. So pretty much the same thing, they just look different. All right, so let's say if we wanted to add a new item into our world. Now, there's a few ways you can do that. You can click on Create, which is right under Hierarchy. Once you do that, it's going to reveal quite a few options. You have Create Empty, Create Empty Child. Now, let's say if you're making a 3D game, you're going to want a 3D object. So if you highlight 3D, you'll see that you have cube, sphere, capsule, cylinder, plane, quad, text, ragdoll, terrain, 3D, you get the point. If you're making a 2D game, you're going to want to add a 2D object, which will be a sprite mask, tile map. You know, we also have effects. You can add a particle system force field. That sounds badass. We have a trail, a line. We can add in a light, which is the one that we removed earlier. So you have directional, point, spot, area, reflection probe. You know, a few other items. You can add a audio source, a camera. You can add things for the UI, meaning like text, a scroll wheel, scroll bar, you know, a bunch of cool stuff. All right, so as the first item we're going to add is going to be a cube. So like I said, you can either click on the Create button, go to 3D, or else you can right click anywhere inside of the hierarchy, and it'll also give you those options. So we're going to go to 3D, and we're going to go to cube. Once you do that, you'll see that a cube shows up inside of the hierarchy. And we also have it inside of the scene window. Now, while it's in the scene window, you'll also see that we have this handle here. Now, this is the manipulator handle. This pretty much helps you navigate your item, or at least your object. Now, we also have the modifiers up here, which is right above the hierarchy window. Now, the first button is the hand tool. If you hover over it, you'll see that it'll display the name of it. We have the hand tool, we have the move tool, we have a rotate tool, we have a scale tool, rec tool, and we also have a tool that's like 3-in-1 where it has move, rotate, and scale. So for now, we're going to click on the hand tool. If you hover over the scene window, you'll notice that if you left click and you hold it, you can move around in the scene. Now, this is one way to move around. Now, another way to move around is if you hold Alt and hold left click, move left and right, you can pan around. If you use the scroll wheel, you can zoom in and out. If you have the item selected in the hierarchy, you can double click it. It'll zoom on into it. Let's say if you were scrolled out and you still have it selected, you can press F. It'll also frame it for you. There you go. Now, let's say you wanted to move this around. You would hit the move tool and just hold on to any one of these arrows and it'll move it in that direction. Hold on, you can pan around. Now, these arrows are representing X, Y, and Z. Green is Y, X is red, and Z is blue. Now, if you're not too sure which direction you're looking at, you could look over here to this little lever and it'll show you all the different axes you can move on. Let's say if you were to click on the Z, you'll notice that it'll change the position. If you click on the cube, it'll put it into like a 2D mode. Now, right under it, you can right click. You can go into free mode. You can go into right, top, left. Let's say if we go into the right mode, it'll put it at a right angle. Top, front. Also in the scene window, we have different ways we can view the objects. We have the shaded view. We have the wireframe view, where you can see the wireframes. We have wireframe and shaded. A few other cool ones. Bake lighting, albedo. But your main three are usually the top three: shaded, wireframe, and shaded wireframe. Now, we also have the, right click that, go to free. If it's in ISO mode, you can always change it to perspective. That way, when you hold Alt, you'll move around. If you middle mouse click on an item, it'll center it. Then you can hold Alt and pan around it. Let's say if you wanted to move your head around in the scene, hold Alt and Control, and you'll be able to shift side to side. Let's say if we wanted to rotate this item. Let me put it on shaded mode so it looks better. I'm going to select the cube. You can either select it in the hierarchy or you can select it in the scene window. I'm going to hit the rotate tool. You'll notice that these curved lines, if you click and hold on any one of them, you'll be able to rotate along that curve. So you can rotate your item. We can also scale it. If I hit the scale tool, you notice that these lines with the little box at the end will come up so we can manipulate it in that way. So there's a lot of ways you can manipulate your object. You can also change the transform values. Now, with the cube selected, you'll notice that in the inspector, I get a few components along with this object. Now, currently, I have a transform, which pretty much lets the game know where is my object positioned in the world. So we have the position, the rotation, and the scale. Now these values we can also modify. Let's say if I hover over the X, these two little arrows will pop up. And if I left click, I can move left or right, change them up. If I want, I can key them in. Highlight it, key it in, press enter, and it'll change the values. Let's say if you were tinkering around with it, but you want to change it back to the way it was. Each component has a settings gear on the upper right. So clicking on that setting gear, you can click on reset and it'll reset the values for you. Let's say if you want to hide some of these components without taking them off, you can just uncheck them and these properties won't be valid until it's rechecked. So there's a lot of cool ways you can mess around with items in your world. Now let's say if I click on the multi-tool, which is move, rotate, and scale all in one. You notice that I get the curves. That way I can rotate it in that position. Or else I get the arrows where I can move it. And I also get this little box in the center, which I can scale my object on all sides. That way it'll scale evenly, which is pretty cool. Now let's say if I wanted a little bit more control, you could change it to global, and then you'll get some extra little boxes at the ends and you can scale them in that direction, which makes it pretty useful. All right, so you guys already see how to add objects to your game. Let's say I add a spear, click on the move tool and bring it up. Press F, zoom in on it. Let's say if I wanted to add a component to this new spear that I added into my game. Because right now, let's say if I try to go into my game, currently I don't have a camera because I deleted it. Like we could have left it in, but I wanted to make sure you guys understood what was going on within this world that I have here. So let's say if we want to add a camera, just right click, go to camera. Now with the camera selected, you'll notice that we have this little window on the bottom right. And it's pretty much representing what we're going to see once we're in game. So now if I click the play button, it'll switch over to this game tab. And within the game tab, it's going to show us exactly what the camera sees. So it's pretty much going into your game. Now, if I'm going to be making any other changes or I'm done looking at the camera view, make sure that you click out of it. Because if you don't, and you try to make some changes while it's on play or pause, the settings will not take and you're just going to have to redo them. So if you're going to start modifying your game after you checked it out, make sure that you're out of play mode and make sure that you're not in pause mode. And of course, you modify things in the scene view. All right, so what else do we have here? Let's see. All right, so in the game view, let's say if you have more than one camera, say we already have one, let's add another. So this is an extra camera. I can rename this, highlight it, go to rename, call this cam 2, press enter. Now if I go over to the inspector where all the components for this camera are, remember this is a brand new camera. If I go into the camera settings, you'll notice that I have a few values that I can change, but you might not always be sure about what you're changing. So if you hover over any one of them, you'll see that it gives a brief description on what this value does. And currently we're hovering over clear flags, what to display, what does it say? What to display in empty areas of the camera's view. So meaning in empty areas where we don't have any objects or anything like that, I want it to see the skybox. Let's say if I wanted it to see a solid color. As you can see, the game view changes. Now, instead of the skybox, it went to a solid color. We can also change the color. Change it to a cool red. Go back into the scene view. I don't see it, but in my camera view, I do. Let's say if I want to change it back to sky, I'll change it. So it's it's a pretty cool way of modifying the values and having the most control possible when interacting with your world, pretty much. All right, so now that we added a camera, let's add in the light because we're missing one of those. So I'm going to add in the light, directional light. And here it is. We can move that up, move that over. If I don't like the way the arrows are being positioned, that's because it's in global, it's not in local. If I switch over to local, you see the arrows change. And I have more control when positioning my object. Okay, what else do we have here? Okay, on file, you can make a new scene, save as, new project. You can go over to your build settings for when you're done developing your game. You can go through the build settings and build and run. There's also edit where you can undo a move you did, copy, paste, duplicate, delete, play, pause, step, selections, project settings, which is the settings for your project. So if you want to change anything up, whether your display, your graphics, your inputs, that's where you'll find that option. You can also click on preferences where you can edit the Unity preferences. Game object, which is pretty much the same as within the hierarchy, where you can add items to your game. There's also components. So when you have an item selected, you can add certain components. Like let's say I have this camera selected and I want to add a physics rigid body. So now if I click into the game, you'll see that the camera is moving because it has a rigid body. I added a component to it. So that's it right here. Let me remove it. So that's a cool way of adding components to any object that you have in your hierarchy. There's also the window where you can get to the asset store. You can adjust your layouts. So like, let's say if you don't like the way your windows are aligned, you want to change up the way it looks. You can also left click on any one of these tabs and move the window to any preferred location you have, which is pretty cool. With the asset store down here, say I want my inspector over here. Let's say if you messed around but you want to change it back, click on layout, go to default, or revert factory settings. You can also do it under the window tab. Click on the window, layout, default. You can also find the package manager, rendering options where, like, let's say if I closed out this game window and I want to bring it back, go over to window, general, game window. You'll see that it pops up and just pop it back in. There you go. Now a few other options, rendering where you can handle the lighting settings, which is pretty cool. And there's a few extra options within the game tab where you can change the display. Of course, you're switching up the camera. The free aspect. So for this window, you can change the aspect ratio. You can change the way the camera looks. You can zoom in a little bit more if you want that. Now, let's say there's a few buttons over here where if you click on maximize on play, so when you click the play button, automatically it goes to full screen, the game mode. But let's close that out, turn that off. You can mute the audio, which is the audio that's attached to the camera. So there's that. There's stats. There's gizmos. Okay, let's go back over to the scene window. Now, of course, over here is your axes, where you can modify and change what position or however which way you feel on looking at your world. You can also lock this window. So if you click on the lock, you can't make any changes. But if you unlock it, you can. And you can change it up and free roam in whichever way you want. All right, there's the shaded, where shaded wireframe, few different views you can use. There's the 2D view. So like, let's say if you want to switch it to a 2D view, click on that. It'll change the angle it's in. It'll change it to a 2D angle. There's also the toggle on and off of the light. So you can click on that and it'll represent the light, and it'll take it away if you don't want it. There's also the audio button, and there's also filters for like the sky, and you can remove and add certain things that you want to see within this window. All right, in your project window, this is pretty much whatever you have inside of your game files, pretty much. So you can make new folders. You can right click, go to create. You can make a new folder. You can make a folder for your materials. Call it my materials. Go inside of that folder, right click, go to create. And then you have a few options. So we're going to make a material. Once you do that, you can name it, call it my color, whatever you want. Highlight it, make sure it shows up on the inspector. Click on this white box. You can change the color. Close that out. As you can see, it stayed. And then you can drag this material onto your game object, and it'll change the color. So now if you change the material color, it'll also change on the object, which is pretty cool. So you can make as many materials as you want. Let's say if I like this object, for some reason it's perfect for what I'm trying to do, and I want to save it. What you can do is highlight it, have it show up under the hierarchy, go back one folder, make a new folder, call it my prefabs, go into that folder, select it, grab it, and bring it into the folder. Once you do that, you'll notice that you'll have a copy of it. So let's say if you delete this one, you can bring it back into the game. It'll have a different location because you did it through the scene window. Like, let's say if we delete it and I drag it back into my world, but I put it in the hierarchy, it'll put it back in the position where I saved it previously. So that's actually pretty cool. You can also duplicate it, rename it Cube 2, you know, just so you can keep track of it. Let's delete that. And there's a few other buttons over here where there's the collab button where you can actually share a project with your friend. So if you guys are both working on the same game, you can both work on it together. There's the cloud button. You can sign out of your account, sign in. There's the layers button. And everything else is pretty simple. Now in the next video, we're going to be going over ProGrids, ProBuilder. You know, it's going to change the look and feel of the UI because we're going to be able to design our level with ease. So if you guys want to be in on that, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit that bell for any notification whenever I drop a new video. And that's pretty much it. If anything, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.